Hello and welcome everyone to another ACC how-to video. Today's assigned topic is driving in the rain. There are a few things to keep in mind when you first start driving in the rain. ACC does not specifically tell you most of these things, but they are crucial to not feeling like you are totally out of control. We have broken the video down into chapters, which you can see below the video. Also, be sure to check out part 2 for some more information regarding racecraft in the rain. We might mention a few things in passing here that will be expanded on in part 2. Tire pressures, an exceptionally important point in ACC in general, and for the rain there is no exception. Most important to note are that the optimal tire pressure window for wet tires is a little different than for dry tires. Getting tire pressures correct is extremely important, and you will have a lot of trouble if you try to use the wet tires in the dry tire pressure window. Of note, the grip pressure window for wet tires is actually a little wider than for dry tires, at least in our experience. So basically, as long as you stay in the 29.0 to the 31.0 window, you should have solid grip levels. An additional important consideration will be the drying of the racing line. This will cause the tires to run warmer and as a result a higher pressure than you would see in testing as a solo car on track. A very good practice to get into in the rain is to do a quick race with the AI to see what happens to your tire pressures or temperatures when there are other cars on track with you. Odds are you will probably have to decrease the pressures by quite a few clicks unless the rain is very heavy to overcome the drying of the racing line. Also, practice at a few different levels of rain and in the dry. ACC server weather settings cause the server to load a little differently each time, and with a high randomness setting and rain above 0.2, you should strongly consider starting with a wet setup, apart from the tires of course, as it is very probable that there will be rain at some point, even if the start is dry. Overheating. If your wet tires are overheating, in other words the color on the little tire indicators are changing to yellow or red, maybe the pressures are riding a little high as well, you can use wet areas of the track to cool the tires down. The best place for this will be on the straights. You can shift your line over by about a car width, maybe a little bit more, to get some nice cool water and track on the tires. This can make a pretty huge impact and will affect the life of your tires significantly. We will say though that this will only help you so much. If you are way off the mark, no amount of cooling is going to save you. Rubbering and oil. Rubbering is another thing to keep in mind with the rain. Under dry circumstances, an optimal track offers the most grip. However, this is not true in the rain. The rubber deposited on the track to increase grip in the dry actually contains oil. When this gets wet, the rubber dissolves and the oil will make things quite slippery on the racing line for the first 10 laps or so after the rain starts. So it may help you to get more grip, at least initially, to move slightly off the racing line onto the so-called wet line, especially in braking zones and accelerating out of corners. You do not have to massively exaggerate this, just half a car width or so should be adequate. ECU, TC and ABS. These are all tools that can be extremely helpful in the rain. The ideal settings for each of these will be car and user dependent. Let's take a look at each of these one at a time. The ECU. So, wet engine maps alter the power delivery and prevent excessive wheel spin or traction control engagement. An important note to make is that the wet ECUs may not necessarily be the fastest. Under the right conditions, the dry ECUs may actually be more advantageous, but if in doubt, the wet ECUs will be safer. TC. TC in the rain will typically use higher settings, and this allows you to lean a little bit on this to help you not spin the rear tires constantly and lose grip, particularly on corner exits. The amount of TC again will be condition specific. Generally, less wet allows TC to be nearer to what you would use in the dry, while more wet means increasing the TC. So this could change over the course of a race as conditions change. ABS. ABS is similar to TC in that you can be nearer the dry setting with less rain and increase as the rain or water increases. ABS will prevent you from skidding off the track every time you try and brake, but overall, it is safer to drive with this higher rather than lower. Brake pads. Officially, brake pads 3 are the ones designated for wet track conditions. If the conditions for a race are unknown and the track starts dry, or maybe it's a long endurance race that might see condition changes, you can also consider brake pads 2. These are endurance pads which only need to be changed after 12 hours or so. They are typically quite adaptable to most track conditions. Brake pads 1 are far less useful in the rain, mainly because they are very temperature sensitive. This means it's possible to get kind of odd braking behavior with cooler or wet conditions. Some general driving considerations. We already mentioned the importance of considering different amounts of rain as well as the presence of other cars on track to try to determine the most appropriate tire pressures. Keep in mind that wet tires take longer to come up to temperature and grip than the dry tires. In the first few laps of a race, you would significantly benefit from not pushing too hard and braking a little early. It's more important to survive without damage than to try speed to the front, especially in the rain. The cars will spread out pretty quickly, at which time you'll be free to be a little bit more aggressive. With the adrenaline of race starts, it's easy to forget this and ignore the track conditions. Also, remember that things can be even more slippery if practiced in qualifying were in the dry, as there will then be rubber which will need to dissolve from the track surface. Curbs and green astro can also be absolute death traps in the rain. It is important to have explored the track and tested some of the curbs to know which ones will bite and which ones won't. Braking in particular should avoid these track extending areas if you want to stay facing the right way. Alright, so some of the icons and what they mean. As the amount of rain changes, so do the icons to indicate this on the screen and in the MFD. There are a few places where ACC makes you aware of the weather. First is when you load into the server, the second is the MFD, and a lot of times it's also displayed on the screen as you drive. This typically shows the weather right now, 10 minutes from now, and 30 minutes from now. On your screen right now you should see a table with most of the icons containing these weather changes. Some are simple, like adding a little plus or minus to the rain icon to indicate whether the rain will be increasing or decreasing. The amount of raindrops can also indicate how heavy the rain is at a particular moment. Also, pay attention to some of the notifications you might get through the race. There will be a little red pop-up telling you that there's a particular tire type that is optimum at a particular condition. Alrighty everybody, that brings today's video to a close. Hopefully you all feel a little bit more comfortable with some of the unknowns about wet weather driving. Be sure to check out part 2 for more information about racecraft in the rain. There are some very important considerations here as well to help make your way through the field as opposed to becoming a victim of the storm. Please remember to like, comment and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Thank you so much for watching. We hope to see you on the next one. Cheers.